Before I got stabbed in my ear, I was working on death row. I was working on death row at CCR. I worked there for 19 years before I got stabbed in my eye.
Okay. When did you get stabbed?
It's been about 9 years ago this year.
So you got stabbed in your eye and your ear on the same in the same incident?
Yes, ma'am.
Then what happened? Why did somebody attack you?
I got off of work that night about 3 o'clock that morning. I got to the dormitory, asked the free man why they had the blue light in the dome. So the free man never answered me. So I just went to my locker box, got my clothes to go take a shower that night. So when I got to taking my shower, I got my clothes on. I got my bag of chip and a cold drink so I can eat that night. So for me to sleep, I got to sleep on my left side, and the dude was trying to kill another person in the dome, but he miscounted the bed wrong and killed me by accident.
We are about to watch the commutation hearing of a man who's been serving a life sentence since 1993. We have the old classic board here, and this is a Miss Jackson case. So let's jump in, and I'll unpack it with what details we have at the end.
So let's get started. You are Alvin Clark, DOC number 178752. You're seeking a commutation of your sentence. You were sentenced in August 1993 in Evangeline Parish to a life sentence for second-degree murder. Mr. Clark, is that information correct? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct information?
Ma'am, I can't hear that loud and good because.
Did you hear what I said? Did you hear the information I said?
We're gonna turn the TV up louder. He's claiming he can't hear.
Okay. So, Mr. Clark, you were sentenced Evangeline Parish, August of 1993 to a life sentence for second-degree murder.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you answer Mrs. Jackson's question?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Mr. Clark, I'm going to try to speak up. Can you hear me?
I can do better because I got stabbed in my ear. I can't hardly hear you that good.
Okay, you got stabbed in your ear?
Yes, ma'am.
Thought you got stabbed in your eye.
I got stabbed in my eye too, ma'am.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to try to speak up. All right?
Yes, ma'am.
How old are you?
65.
How long have you been in prison on this charge?
30 years, ma'am.
All right. And the victim in this case, what was your relationship with the lady that you killed?
I was in a parish jail in 92. Me and her son was in a parish jail in 92. And I had told her son that I didn't really want to visit his mother. And he would always have his mother come visit me. And when my sister was supposed to come visit me one day, and I go downstairs, I thought it was my big sister that come visit me. And come to find out it was Miss Larry Joseph downstairs visit me.
So let me just, was she your girlfriend at one time?
No, ma'am.
She was never your girlfriend?
No, ma'am.
So why did you, go ahead.
When I come out of jail in 92, November of 92, I come out of jail. My sister was supposed to pick me up at the parish jail that day at night at 12:01. And she wound up and got me at the parish jail that night. So the night she come got me, I went at her house that night. The first night I come out of jail, ma'am.
Well, why, if she wasn't your girlfriend, why would she pick you up from prison?
Because her son had told her that I would get a disability check. And that's how I guess she come pick me up that night.
Why were you getting a disability check?
I had felt my nerve had pulled my head all the way to the back a couple of years ago when I was a kid, when I was young. I went to Pineville and Jackie years ago for my nerve. And they kept me in Pineville about 6 or 7, about 5 months, I think, or maybe 3 months. They kept me in Pineville for my nerve. And I went to school one day. I had felt sick because my nerve had pulled my head all the way to the back.
Okay. So why did you shoot into her house?
Well, when Larry Jordan had robbed me for $680 that night, that Saturday morning, I didn't want to go out of home that day. I regret by me going out of house that day. And when I should have let the sheriff department handle that situation, I was mad that day, and I was frustrated. I was drunk that day, man.
So you were standing outside her house and you shot into the house and hit her?
I was standing through the window. I was standing outside the house. So I just went to the house and shot her that night, man.
Yeah, but did you go in the house and shoot her, or did you shoot her while you were outside the house?
She got shot through the window, ma'am.
Right, you shot her through the window from the outside.
Yes, ma'am.
And she had taken the money from your disability? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, how did she get that? How did she get that?
I was at my mother's house that day. I was at my mother's house that Saturday. My sister told me that Mr. Larry Joe was looking for me at my mother's house that day. And I was drunk that day. And when I jumped in the truck, I fell asleep. And when I wake up, I was in a motel that day. I was in a motel. And when I wake up, she had robbed me for $680 and left me in the motel that day.
How far did you go in school? Before you went to prison, how far did you go in school?
I went through 5th grade, ma'am.
Were you in special education classes?
Yes, ma'am. That when my father died at years, I ran away from home and go at the racetrack to take care of my mama and my little sister. Because at the time that they would give like $75 with the food stamp and this $80 was a welfare check. So I had to try to work to take care of my mom and my sister.
Okay. Can you read and write?
No, ma'am.
Do you have a job at the prison?
Yes, ma'am.
What's your job?
Ma'am,
What is your job at the prison?
I'm class A trustee. I work at the ice house, operate the machine, give people the ice and take it to the dormitory.
How long have you had that job?
I've been working there 4 years. Before,
Okay, what else have you done? What other kind of jobs have you done?
Before I got stabbed in my ear, I was working on death row. I was working on death row in CCR. I worked there for 19 years before I got stabbed in my eye.
Okay, when did you get stabbed?
It's been about 9 years ago this year.
So you got stabbed in your eye and your ear in the same incident?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what happened? Why did somebody attack you?
I got off of work that night about 3 o'clock that morning. I got to the dormitory, asked the free man why they had the blue light in the dome. So the free man never answered me. So I just went to my locker box, got my clothes to go take a shower that night. So when I got to taking my shower, I got my clothes on, and we got my bag of chip and a cold drink so I can eat that night. So for me to sleep, I got to sleep on my left side and the dude was trying to kill another person in the dome, but he miscounted the bed wrong and killed me by accident.
So somebody stabbed you thinking they were stabbing somebody else?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you lose vision in your eye?
I lost my left eye.
Okay, and it damaged your
Yes,
right
ma'am.
ear?
Yes, ma'am. They had to put a pump. They had to put a pump in a tube. They put a pump in my left eye, and they also put a tube in my right eye for the fluid.
I see you've taken some programs, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Which one are you most proud of?
I love anger management the most because anger management teaches you how to control your temper and your anger, and it's also teach you how to walk away from trouble, and it's also teach you how to walk away and make it be a better person than the next person be. It also teach you how to think before you make a foolish decision that you regret.
Okay. And you said you were drunk or under the influence when you killed the lady?
Yes, ma'am.
Alcohol or drugs?
I was drinking half one of gin and vodka that night, ma'am.
Did you drink a lot back then?
No, man, that was the first time I drank in my whole entire life, and I would never used to drink
Or what made you drink that night?
because I was always depressed when I come out of jail. That was depressed that day, and my brother had got into it that day, so I decided I had to buy me half a pint of gin and some vodka that day. So,
That's the only time you ever had alcohol?
ma'am,
That's the only time you ever had alcohol in your whole
Yes.
life?
yes, ma'am.
Well, if you were to get out, Mr. Clark, who would you live with? How would you take care of yourself?
I believe with my brother Larry Clark in Mendon, Louisiana, and I got a job for me working construction.
You think you can do construction work?
Yes, ma'am. I work construction. I used
Say
to
again.
I used to train horses years ago at the racetrack in New Orleans. I used to I used to train horses years ago at the racetrack in New Orleans and galloping horses.
All right. But you said you were working construction.
Years ago before I started working the track, ma'am. I worked construction years ago.
I understand. All right. You've only had 18 write-ups. Does that sound about right?
Yes, ma'am.
And the last one was in 2004.
That when I got stabbed in my eye that year.
Okay, what'd you get written up for in 2004?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the write-up for?
When I got stabbed in my eye in my ear that year.
They wrote you up because you got stabbed?
Yes, ma'am. They had wrote me up, ma'am.
For what? What was the
Because
charge?
they thought I had started trouble in the dawn with the dude, but the dude had miscounted the bed wrong when he jugged me by accident. And they
Okay.
didn't mess the write up.
Did you ever get a write-up for gambling?
No, ma'am, I don't gamble, ma'am.
Okay, all right. All right, Mrs. Renoxa, that's all I have, thank you. Juanita, is there anything you can add?
Ma'am,
Just need to hold on, I think that's that. Yeah. Yeah. So in 2014, he did get it right. I mean, 2004, he did get it right up for having a bottle of cologne, in an eye drop container. So he did have a contraband write-up.
Contraband.
Yes, ma'am.
I can't hear you, ma'am.
You had a contraband write-up in
Yes, ma'am.
2004.
Yes, ma'am.
And other than that, everything else is
The contraband wrap that I had, I found an old empty bottle of eye drop on the floor that I picked up and put inside my locker box. But I didn't have nothing in it, so I just picked up on the floor and put it inside my locker box that time.
Right. All right. As I mentioned, you do have some family that's here observing, but would you like to say a few words to us before we go?
Ma'am?
Is there anything you want to say to us?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry from taking Miss Larry's life away from my family, ma'am. That I regret each and every day that I pray and get on my knees for the pain that I caused them. And I pray that God that they don't have hold me any information, then I have to accept my apologies forgiven. But one day that I pray that the Larry parents will forgive me from taking the Larry life away from them. And I pray each and every day that the Lord can have mercy on me.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. I want you to know that we do have some letters from the folks there at Angola in the record. Warden Nettles wrote you a really good letter.
Yes, ma'am.
Captain Pierre wrote you a really good letter, as did Burl Kane.
Yes, ma'am.
They spoke very highly of you.
Ma'am.
They spoke real good about you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I just wanted you to know that. I think we're prepared to vote, Mrs. Jackson.
All right, Mr. Clark, my vote today is going to be to recommend a commutation of your sentence to 99 years with immediate parole eligibility. You have a good prison record, very few write-ups for the amount of time you've been in jail. You have very positive remarks from prison officials. And so my vote today would be to grant your recommend a commutation with immediate parole eligibility.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Roche?
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Clark, based
sir.
upon the recommendation letters that you received from the staff at Louisiana State Penitentiary, I'm going to agree with Ms. Jackson and recommend to the governor to commute your sentence to 99 years with immediate parole eligibility.
Mr. Marabella?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My vote is going to be the same as Ms. Jackson and Mr. Roche. Good luck to you, sir.
Mr. Freeman?
My vote is also the same.
All right, Mr. Clark, and I do agree based on your age, the length of incarceration, and the positive support you have from prison officials. My vote's the same, so we'll make that recommendation on your behalf to the governor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Did you hear what we did?
No, ma'am.
You've been granted.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Have a good recommendation.
Good luck.
All
Thank
right,
y'all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
10-3, we're going to adjourn at 1:51 p.m. Thanks for accommodating us today, Warden Member and
You're
staff.
welcome.
Thank you.
So I don't have the appeals or anything to go over in this hearing, so I'm just going to talk based off of what I saw. It was hard not to root for him with his family looking on like that and their celebration, frankly. That there's a soft place in my heart for his family there. And you don't hear from the DA, you don't hear from the victims. It's, he served a long time, but it's as far as we can see here on the records, he's still in Angola. Now, they made a recommendation to the governor, But what's interesting is that what's different about this case than the other cases where they made recommendations in the same month is we have a record that the governor commuted. It's possible that it's just lost somewhere or that no one published it. Now, if he commuted, he's still going to have a parole hearing. And he hasn't had the parole hearing yet. It's possible that we're going to see him in the next, before this year is over, before 2024. The reason I say that with somewhat confidence is because many of the other hearings where the governor commuted, we see the parole hearings in the dockets. So if we do see him come up, we'll play that hearing for you. It's not a shoo-in because it's a new governor with a new board, and the new board doesn't have loyalty to the old governor signing a commutation or the old board, which that governor hand picked. So, in the past, pretty much a shoo-in, 98, 99%, I would say, because why would the board recommend the governor sign a document to commute? The governor says, okay, board, thank you for recommending it. I'm signing it. And then the board to say, no, we changed our mind. It's not a good look. But it has happened a few times. And there are a few times it has happened. I think in one case, we saw victims show up where the victims weren't notified about the commutation hearing. There probably are political implications going on in the background where the governor's like, oh, man, I didn't realize people actually were going to make a fuss out of this. So, I think there are situations like that. But again, we'll find out. Something else that we saw in this hearing that we really don't see often, and that is stories of violence. And I know Angola at one point was one of the most notorious, dangerous prisons. Over the years, it has, I think, taken a huge shift, especially compared to the other prisons, like seeing Utah on Mandu 2, the second channel covered Utah hearings in 4 other states. Utah is dangerous. I had no idea, but I think it's ranked top 3 most dangerous. And so many parole hearings we see come up where people are talking about the danger and the injuries they've sustained there. We don't see it that much in Angola. Again, it could be because it's shifted, or I don't know, maybe it's taboo to talk about it, or you're not, I don't know. But to think that you're stabbed in the eye and in the ear, how scary that is. And it almost makes me wonder, he got it right up in it. Is he playing it off? A lot, just the way he spoke, it made me feel that he's an habitual liar, pathological maybe. It really felt like there was just wacky dishonesty. First time I ever drank, I just don't believe it. It's a weird thing to say where you might say, okay, well, maybe I'll believe it, but things just weren't like adding up. His stories would kind of like go through these winding, I don't know, like gaslighting type of routes where you would just forget what question you asked and you're just like, oh, whatever. And I think the board knew they wanted to grant anyways. And then he doesn't gamble, but he worked at a racetrack. And I know it's not fair for me to go there, but I can't imagine working at a racetrack and not gambling. But the warden didn't mention the write-up for the gambling. But then the cologne, he had a story for that. I don't know. But he did have a nice final speech, when you look in perspective to some others, and some don't even make final speeches. But I don't know. I'm for the commutation in this case. It's just how long he's been serving, and his family so excited to see him. But let's see if we see his parole hearing, if there are any changes. Thank you, Richard, for the info. And with that, we'll move to the next hearing or let you go, however we take this.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brown. How are you?
Don't look a little better. Signs to be bothering me.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's got that issue. Mr. Brown, you're here before the pardon board this afternoon. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us your name and your DOC number.
My name is Chester Brown, 97-411.
97-411, yes, sir.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Brown, My name is Cheryl Renanza. Seated to my far left is Mrs. Bonnie Jackson. To
Okay,
my left is Mr. Alvin Roche. To my far right, Mr. Pete Freeman. To my immediate right is Mr. Tony Marabella. I'm going to read some identifying information, ask you to confirm it, then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jackson because your case has been assigned to her. She'll take the lead on the interview. We also have joining us today, Mr. Norris Henderson, who's indicated he'd like to speak on your behalf. We'll call on him at the appropriate time. When we're done, you'll be allowed to make a statement if you'd like to do so before we go. All right?
yes, ma'am.
All right. So, Mr. Chester Brown, your DOC is 97411. You're
Right.
classified as a second felony offender. You're seeking a commutation of your sentence. You were sentenced in March 1982 in Orleans Parish to life for a second-degree murder conviction. Is that information correct, Mr. Brown?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr.
Good evening, Mr. Brown. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Your case has been assigned to me, so I'll start off the questioning for the board. How old are you, Mr. Brown?
I'm 40. Excuse me. I'm 65 right now.
All right. Well, I heard that 65 is the new 40, so it'll be okay. How much time have you actually served on this sentence?
I came here in 82.
So about 40 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think it was 40 years in March.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Brown, this case involved a shooting at a lounge in New Orleans that happened during the course of an armed robbery.
Yes, ma'am.
According to the information, there were 3 of you present in the bar at the time of the robbery. And as you all were leaving, one of the people with you shot and killed a patron of the bar, and then the bar owner shot one of the people who had come into the lounge to commit the robbery.
Correct.
And so you and the other gentleman who survived were both arrested and charged with murder. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Could you tell us very briefly in your own words how you became involved in committing this crime?
I didn't hear you. Say it again.
I said, could you tell us briefly how you became involved in committing this crime?
Oh, we wound up together one night. We stumbled across each other one night in the street. We had to prepared to go on one way. I was going one way. He had to give me a ride. So we had to wind up going in the ballroom.
And what happened?
Excuse me?
I said, what happened when you got to the ballroom?
He wound up robbing the ballroom.
Wait, you keep saying wound up. I mean, things don't happen.
I didn't.
I said, things don't just happen. They happen because somebody makes a decision to do something.
We made
So
a
you
decision going. We made a decision going in the ballroom, collect, get money, to rob him. We wound up robbing the ballroom.
Well, what was your part in it?
For my part,
Yeah, what was your part
going
in
in the
the-
ballroom, ma'am.
What was your part in the robbery and the incident that happened in the
I wound up
ballroom?
going in the ballroom too.
Okay, and what happened when you got in the ballroom?
We wound up robbing the man ballroom by gunpoint. On the way backing out, somebody shot back in the ballroom. The ballroom man wound up shooting back out. While we going out the door.
Okay, so you admit that you did go into the ballroom.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The report indicates that you were basically the lookout person. You were at the door as a lookout when the other two gentlemen approached the bar owner and demanded the money. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you were there to be a lookout.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, Mr. Brown, because you've given a lot of different statements about what happened. The last statement you made when you applied for today's hearing was that you were in the car, you never got out of the car, you had nothing to do with this. But today you're saying you did get out of the car, you did go into the bar room, and you were the lookout. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. How old were you back then? About 20?
I think I was 19.
Okay. Well, how did you know those two fellows that you went to the bar room with?
Well, we grew up in the neighborhood together.
Okay. And I understood that there was maybe some drug use involved, that y'all were looking for money so you could go and buy some drugs.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell me about what kind of drugs were you using back then?
I was using cocaine.
Okay, was cocaine the only thing you were using?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I thought, did I see something about heroin or
No,
or my,
I never used no heroin.
so it was cocaine?
Yes, ma'am.
And how old were you when you started using cocaine?
I had to be about 15, 16.
Okay, and how did you get involved in using cocaine at that young age?
In the neighborhood.
Okay. How far did you go in school?
I went to the 7th grade.
Okay, and what happened that stopped you from going to school in the 7th grade?
I wound up getting, I got sick or something. Can't remember what it was. I had to have surgery on my back.
When you were in the 6th grade?
Yeah, I had to have surgery. My mama took me out of school, but I had the surgery.
Okay, and you never went back?
No, ma'am.
Do you know why not?
Streets.
Okay, you just lost interest and you didn't go back anymore?
They went in the streets. That was, I started trying to get my education through the prison life.
Say that again.
Uh-huh.
What was the last thing you said?
I said, I went in the streets.
Okay, all right. So, do you have a job at the prison?
Yes, ma'am. I was working in the kitchen. I stood in the kitchen working 39 years in the kitchen. As a cook.
39 in the kitchen?
As a cook, 39 years.
Okay. You don't do that anymore?
No, Wal Bernard, I was getting too old to be in the kitchen. He wanted to put me in the laundry.
Okay, so are you in the laundry?
Yes, ma'am.
And how long have you been in the laundry?
By 8 years.
Well,
8.
okay, that doesn't exactly add up. If you were in the kitchen 39 years and you've been in the laundry 8 years, that would be 47 years. You haven't been in prison 47 years.
I could be on come on, I lost some time on it. I know I've been in it a while.
Okay. Okay. All right, I understand. You've done 100 hours of pre-release.
Yes, ma'am.
2017, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in 2014, I see that you did Cage Your Rage. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Are those the only two programs you've done?
I got to do a lot of other programs in the kitchen, and they'll get us a certificate in the kitchen while we were cooking. And one security man, he to be a dietitian.
Mhm.
He started writing up the certificates in there.
Okay, now I'm not talking about things you got from working in the kitchen. I'm talking about other classes or other programs, like you told me you were using cocaine at the time that you were out in the streets. Did you ever do any substance abuse programs in prison? Did you ever go to NA or AA or living in balance? Have you done any kind of substance abuse treatment?
I was trying to get in substance abuse, but they told me there were too full backlog on.
Well, but you've been in prison a long time.
I've been trying to get in there.
When I was looking at the master prison record, they say that you refused some programs. You had the opportunity
No,
to
ma'am.
programs and you refused those programs.
No, ma'am.
I can just tell you what they wrote on the master prison record. Tell me about your write-ups. Do you know how many write-ups you've had? If you had to guess, how many do you think you had?
You see about 40?
Does 43 sound about right?
Yes, ma'am.
And it looks like your last one was in 2015.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was a 21C, an aggravated sex offense. Do you remember what happened in that incident?
Yeah, I remember.
And what happened? How'd you get that write up?
Man, I was secured another inmate.
Okay. What was your punishment?
I was sent to the cell block.
For how long?
So my 90 days, I get my 90 days.
About 90 days?
Yes, ma'am.
Other than working in the kitchen, do you have any job skills? Have you been trained to do anything? Have you gotten any programs that gave you some job training?
I got other job training. I worked at the incinerator, how to use compressor, incinerator compressor with a, you heard me?
Yeah, I did.
I done a job at the incinerator, how to burn like a pack compressor up.
So all of your job training has been on the job.
Yes, ma'am.
Learn how to do things while you were actually doing the job, is what you're telling us.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, if you were to be released, Mr. Brown, how are you going to support yourself? How are you going to take care of yourself?
I know how to do semen work too.
Yeah, but you're 65 years old.
I know how to do semen work.
I know, but you're 65 years old. That's hard work, cement work.
I can do it.
Well, but you think you could find somebody to let you do it? You have to have somebody who's willing to try to take you on. Where would you live?
I live with my niece, you know. I got somebody to take me.
Where does your niece live?
She living out in Hammond.
And when's the last time you spoke to your niece?
I speak to them every day.
All right. And they told you that they could take you in?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it a particular niece or one niece in particular that said she's gonna take you in?
I got any one of my nieces to take me in.
Well, do you think their living situation would allow them to take you in?
I think so.
But, because I don't see anybody on the screen for you today. I don't see any of your family members. Did your family members know that you were gonna be before the board today?
Yes, ma'am.
And did they say they were gonna be here or try to, you know, log on to TV?
Last I knew, they told me they were gonna be there.
You know, Mr. Brown, I'm really concerned about you. You haven't done a whole lot to help yourself in the last 40 years. You haven't
I want the board.
a lot of programs.
I want the board. They could give me a chance. I wouldn't let the board down.
Well, I know, but one way we can look at, we look at what you've done since you've been in prison. And the problem is you just haven't been motivated. You haven't done a lot of classes. You haven't done a lot to try to help yourself. And so that makes it hard for the board to help you when you haven't done enough work to help yourself. And that concerns me.
Mm-hmm.
Warden?
Yes, ma'am.
What can you tell us about Mr. Brown?
Ms. Jackie, you've been very thorough in the history here, and a bit of clarification. Yeah, primarily he's worked in the kitchen for the first 35 years of his incarceration, and the last 5 he's worked in laundry. Has had the write-ups you discussed, that one write-up in 15 prior to that, write-up in 2001. He does have a medical history. I've got a paragraph here from nurse practitioner Clark that he does have a history of cirrhosis, hypertension, and venous insufficiency, as well as a neurofibromatosis. And he does require some scheduled follow-ups as far as ultrasound, but rarely makes a sick call and has a regular duty status. There's not much else that I can add at this point.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Warden. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Henderson, we'd like to hear from you.
Good evening. I think I start where Ms. Jackson left off when she was asking Chester about his employment. That is the very same question Mr. Roche posed several years ago at his last hearing about why he didn't have any of the skills. And at that time, Mr. Roche didn't understand that sometimes folks get locked into a job and they just stay in those jobs. Prior to the laws changing, Chester had no opportunity to ever think he was going to get out. And what you hear today is someone who, one, is very humble and very afraid of what he needs to say. When you were questioning him, Ms. Jackson, he kind of like interrupted and was talking about, if I get the chance to get out, I wouldn't disappoint anybody, And this is where he's at in his life. It's kind of like at this point where he's just afraid that, one, he don't want to die in prison without an opportunity of trying to be released. I am here primarily because I'm willing to help Chester in the event the board makes a favorable recommendation. for him. One of the things about, and I think he was talking about the family. Sometimes this is more taxing on the families than it is on individuals. Everybody's family just can't get up for the letdown. And sometimes, and I don't know if Chester did or didn't, but sometimes guys just ask their families, look, I'm just gonna go it alone because I don't want to bring y'all through this again. That may or may not be the case in this situation. But I've been knowing Chester for a long time. And he got into that kitchen and the cooking, and he became an institution of need in a man prison kitchen, cooking for over 2,000 people a day on his ship. And he done the job well. He wouldn't have stayed in that job for 35 years. And it was gracious of Warren Benoit, because Warren Benoit used to always look out for the older guys. That realizing, that getting up 2 o'clock in the morning, going to the kitchen, before anybody walked to kind of prepare food over a 35-year period had to become taxing on him. And so I would just ask that the board really consider his age, 65 years of age. He's been in prison 40 years and counting. To at least give him an opportunity to present himself to the governor, and the governor decides whether or not he gets your recommendation. And if he does, he'd have to come back to y'all. And if there's any, the word I'm looking for, provisos that the board wants to put on him, I think the board can make that inclusive in the recommendation to the governor that Chester does so and so to the extent that he can. His aptitude may not be the greatest, but he is a person who learns with his hands. And one of the things you mentioned, Ms. Jackson, that a lot of his jobs has been on-the-job training, and something that he's very proficient at doing. Once he get a hang of something, he can do the job. So I would just ask the board to really consider these things. And in relationship to the questions around the crime, a lot of guys for years didn't really understand the laws of principle. That, I didn't do nothing, I didn't shoot anybody, but you were there. And so that culpability transferred to you as if you were the person who actually committed the crime. And in this case, actually the person who pulled the trigger. So I think the combination of those things, I would just ask that the board really consider, making a recommendation to the governor on Chester's behalf. Thank y'all for hearing me out.
Norris, can I ask you a question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any possibility for some sort of transitional living? Because, he's being well, and it's one thing to say you're going to take somebody in. It's another thing to deal with the reality of having an extra burden.
Exactly.
In your house.
Exactly. I would get Chester into the first 72. The reason I don't really show up as much representing the first 72 because we created a transitional house for women. And I've been kind of like trying to dedicate all my energy towards getting that house up and running. We just closed on a house several weeks ago, and we're just trying to get it prepared. So, but I can get him into the first 72. They provide all the wraparound services he needs. Once he transitions from his first 72, I have a crew of guys who work for me, who clean up the building. That's kind of like light duty work. But they make $600 a month to go along with the SSI. And the reason they make that because they're older guys and don't want to risk losing their SSI by making more money than that. But I can help Chester get straight that way. First 72 will help him access all the benefits that he's eligible for.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Brown,
Yes, ma'am.
is there a statement you'd like to make to the board before we vote?
I would like to see my little nephew and nieces, see what they come to be, to grow up, get out there and see what they come to be.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you, sir. We're going to be voting. We'll start with Mrs. Jackson.
Mr. Brown, you know, you've been in prison a really long time. I would like to have seen you get more done, but, you know, like Mr. Norris said, you worked in the kitchen for 35 years. And that kind of took your attention. And not everybody is able to do what other people might be able to do. But my vote today is going to be to grant a commutation to 99 years immediate parole eligibility because of your age and the number of years you've served. That's just my vote.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Mr. Roche?
Mr. Brown,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Brown, this is your third application. I told you last time that you're ill prepared. You have 2 programs and 42 years of incarceration. No organizational participation, no vocational skills. And I understand that you got institutionalized in the kitchen for 35 years. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
I want you to understand this. You're gonna have to appear before a parole panel if you get a recommendation and if the governor signs it.
Yes, sir.
At such time, if I'm on the panel, and you don't have some programs, you don't have some community service, you don't have some participation in some programs, you could join the Lookout Project and help
Okay.
with you. You can do something around the institution to make yourself available to offenders. You need some programs, you need some activity. You just can't work in the kitchen.
Yes,
I
sir.
know you don't work in the kitchen anymore, you work in the laundry, but you have to do something else besides work. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to vote along with Ms. Jackson and recommend the governor a commutation of sentence. It's immediate parole eligibility.
Thank you.
You have to show some effort in the next year or 2 to show that you are trying to rehabilitate yourself. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Roche. Mr. Marvell?
Mr. Brown, I'm going to go along with Judge Jackson. My vote's going to be to commute your sentence to 99 years with immediate parole eligibility. I think
Yes.
you heed the words of Mr. Roche, though. You need to do some things, some more things while you're in prison. So when you come before the parole board, if you get that far,
Yes, sir.
that you have to show them. Okay, good luck to you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Freeman?
I concur with my colleagues and I also vote the grant with immediate eligibility.
All right, Mr. Brown, you've received 4 votes to make that recommendation that your sentence be commuted to 99 years and that you be made parole eligible immediately. So we will make that recommendation on your behalf to the governor.
Thank you.
Good luck, sir.
Thank you.
All right, you got some work to do now.
All right. Thank you.
This hearing took place in 2022, and the spreadsheet I have from Richard shows that he's not in prison anymore. Now, what happened in between is not clear. We have a pretty efficient spreadsheet that we would have seen his parole hearing if he had had one, and we would cover it. So I don't know, but he's out, and I'm happy for him that he's out. You know, out of all the people that we cover, to be a lookout man in a robbery of a bar or murder, you know, which turned it's and this is the case. If anyone should get out, I think it's him. You know, for those of you who are curious about his 21C write-up, what that is that it's a you know, it's a sex offense write-up. It's consensual. Here's the Angola handbook. So 21 is anyone who does it, and C is this, right? So, I mean, you know, you're in prison basically your whole life. I think those things are going to happen. I'm just going to reserve my comments for this to talk about Norris Henderson. And I'm going to read an article about him, and I'll just talk about him a little bit. And please put in the comment section. I don't like Norris Henderson and what he says. I don't like any of these people in the parole projects, right? But specifically with Norris Henderson in this hearing, what he starts off by saying that he uses the words Mr. O'Shea didn't understand. I mean, he's talking about the most studious person, I think, in like Louisiana law. The guy was a librarian for his life, and not a librarian in the sense that he sat there and handed out books. His job was just to sit and study law. And he understands, if there's anyone that understands, it's Mr. O'Shea understands about how the system works. He doesn't need to be told by Norris that Mr. O'Shea doesn't understand. And it just bothers me, the things that he says in all of these hearings. It's like as if he doesn't prepare. He doesn't write down something to say, that he's coaching the board. He's telling the board, you know, if you could just put it in, and then the governor can decide, and then this is how it can work, and this is how it can work. It's like, don't coach the board. Tell the board what you're going to do for him. Tell the board what it is that you'll do to make them feel comfortable that he's going to be going out after spending like 40 years locked up and with no other support. That's what you should be doing. And you might say, well, he's obviously qualified to do this position. And the answer is no. He's an entrepreneur. He got out of prison. He started his project, which is good for him. It's probably a very profitable venture. You know, what happened is that Louisiana wanted to move inmates from prison, which are very costly. So the prisons that are publicly traded, they lobby the Louisiana to say, hey, you know, we need help. We filled our prisons and we're incredibly profitable for our shareholders. But now these same inmates, they're getting old, and we got to now pay for them. That's expensive. So Louisiana, please help us. So they lobbied to have these new programs set up, and that created an opportunity for people like Norris Henderson and Mr. Meyer to open up these not-for-profits that get funneled money from the state. It's just moving one, you know, taxpayers are still paying for it. It's just that now the cost is being held by these different programs. But that doesn't mean that you can't take time to write a speech and not put down Mr. O'Shea and not try to coach the board on how the system works. It really, and I see it, and we see it over and over and over for now going on how many years, and it just rubs me the wrong way. Now, again, good for him. I think he's doing great. He's doing better than most of us would do for getting out of prison after being locked up for so long and being an entrepreneur. It just irks me when it comes to to how he presents at these hearings. Now, this is an interesting article. James Gill wrote it. For convicted killer, Norris Henderson rehabilitated does not mean innocent. This is quite interesting. I just found this. Norris Henderson is a passionate advocate for Louisiana prison reform, and no wonder. Watch him on YouTube, and his outrage over the cruelty and injustice of the system shines through. I spent 27 years, 10 months, and 18 days for a crime I did not commit, he declares. Oh, on that note, right, that's what also Henderson said. He said, prisoners didn't understand that being a lookout means that you actually did it. And he didn't understand. But it's like, what are you saying? Here's his appeal. 2019, he's still saying that Daryl, the guy who we just saw, this is what I just meant to say, he's still saying that he's not guilty. Okay. So, like, again, don't coach the board when it was just a few years ago that he's still insisting he's not guilty. Petitioner Chester Brown, Louisiana state prisoner, filed his federal application seeking habeas corpus relief. According to the allegations he makes in his application, the attachment here too was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to a term of life in prison in 1982. And again, remember, I'm for him getting out. I'm just not for Mr. Henderson coaching the board and just speaking untruth. This is not a good look. He asked that these federal proceedings be stayed while he pursues his remedies in state courts. And basically they conclude in this. So here, claims of actual innocence based on newly discovered evidence have never been held to state a ground for federal habeas corpus relief absent of independent constitutional violations occurring to the underlying state criminal proceedings. This rule is grounded in principle that federal habeas corpus ensure that individuals are not imprisoned in violation of the Constitution. So again, it is therefore recommended that petitioner request for a stay be denied and that federal application habeas corpus relief be dismissed with prejudice. And again, here he was just recently claiming to be innocent. So, but let's go back to this article where it seems Mr. Norris Henderson is claiming to be innocent. Let's see. I haven't read it yet. I just glanced at it. He gets the hero treatment wherever he goes. Every time he is introduced at some forum, the audience will be told he was wrongfully convicted, and it is rare for the media to mention his name without attaching the word exonerated. It is such an inspiring story that nobody appears to have checked it out. The truth is that Henderson is a murderer, and in all likelihood, a double murderer. The only reason he is not still in prison is that under the law in effect, when he did his killing, a friendly judge could get a lifer out. Well, I mean, anyways, the judge who gave Henderson his break in 2003 was Calvin Johnson, who has since retired and is now New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landry's criminal justice coordinator. Henderson testified at New Orleans City Council latest hearing on explaining the parish prison. He took time to acknowledge that elaboration that he owed his freedom to Johnson, who was sitting nearby. Johnson didn't release Henderson because he thought he was innocent. Indeed, it was Johnson who confirmed Henderson's guilt in 1994 in a bench trial after his original conviction was overturned. Henderson was freed on grounds that his sterling work as a jailhouse lawyer on behalf of his fellow inmates indicated he was fully rehabilitated. I did not know he was a jailhouse lawyer. He's probably very smart and understands the lie. He's just not good at presenting, in my opinion. As director of voice on the ex-offender and Safe Street Strong communities, Henderson has demonstrated a commitment. And let me know maybe it's just me that's seeing this. Let me know if you think differently. As director of the Voice Ex-Offender Safe Street Community, Henderson has demonstrated a commitment to advance civil liberties. His ACLU observer is one in Ben Smith in 2009. Henderson had the ACLU suckered to its new release proclaimed. Remember, I'm just reading this ACLU. I'm not stating anything. I am reading, okay? Wrongfully incarcerated, he also named an Open City Institute Sarvis Justice Fellow. Henderson's subsequent career might be said to have justified Johnson's decision, but time has come to stop spreading the big lie. Louisiana has plenty of ex-cons released when they turned out to have been railroaded by Henderson is not one of them. Isn't that interesting? I had no idea that he was proclaiming to be innocent. When Henry Joseph was gunned down in the street in 1974, his sister Betty Jean Joseph was watching. She gave a statement to police fingering Henderson and Robert Benjamin as the killers, and said they had told her to keep quiet or else. Benjamin wound up pleading guilty, but Henderson was still in the land the next year when Betty Jean Joseph, aged 19, was attacked and shot one morning on her way to school. As she lay lying, she identified Henderson as one of her assailants. A jury convicted him of murder in 1977. He was sentenced to life. Life means life these days, but at that time, it meant he could not be eligible for parole, probation, suspension sentence for a period of 20 years. And life does not mean life these days. Henderson won a retrial because he had been denied access to a police report and chose to go without a jury. That made sense for Johnson, always had a healthy respect for the rights of the defendant, but Henderson drew a blank again. The appeal court upheld the conviction, but since Henderson had been resentenced under the old second-degree murder statute, the way was clear for Johnson to release him later on probation. Johnson said Tuesday that he did not remember ruling in the Henderson case. He did, however, remember that he had been impressed by Henderson's legal prowess when he was in Angola. How do you not remember ruling on a case? Regardless, it's like, I don't remember sentencing someone to life in prison. Regardless of the other facts, there were many other facts. He did a lot of good, Johnson said. Although Henderson's conviction stands, he claims of innocence are his truth, Johnson said. It's so interesting. The guy you sentenced him to life is like buddies with him and still even saying, well, it's his truth. Henderson was 20 years old when he murdered Betty Jean Joseph and is no doubt a reformed character as he pursues his penological reform, which he has evidently become expert. Perhaps he is, as the ACLU has averred, an inspiration to those concerned with the rights of the unpresented and voiceless. But there is none so voiceless as Betty Jean Joseph. And look, I mean, I guess the dying words of a girl who's laying on the street is as pretty incriminating as it gets, unless you're believing that the police made the whole thing up, or she pointed at the wrong person, thought it was him. I mean, I guess there is a lot to go into there. He was found guilty. He's not actually innocent. He's proclaiming his innocence. Who knows? But that was an interesting article, and yeah, he is out. I don't have any other updates on him. I could do one quick Google search, I guess. Yeah, I don't see anything else. So with that, I'll let you go.